But there was one performance in particular where there was some stuff going on in my life, whether it was stress or different medication I was taking. It was something that affected my voice. One particular memory of standing up in front of this audience, doing what I would consider, an aria that I can do standing on my head, and suddenly there was just this realization that my body wasn't working for me. It was like my body was over there, I was over here, and there was just no connectivity, and that was a really bitter pill to swallow. There was definitely that just was a very unpleasant feeling. And out of everything in my whole career, I would say it's that feeling that if there was one thing that made me want to give up performing altogether, it was that sense of you felt like you were a fraud in front of the audience. That sense that I had on the stage is something that propels me to really have a great plan in place now to make sure that if I am ill, that recovery, having a good team around you as well, is super critical. If you are someone that's really been put under pressure to thrive as a musician and that's stressing you out, might be looking at diversifying your income streams and finding some other things that are equally as interesting and enjoyable to you that maybe take that pressure off. Not having to worry that what the next bill is to pay, that's a massive thing that you can put to one side and say, well, that bit's done. Let me focus on getting better. It's that adversity of things going wrong that then make you confront and see that behavior in a different light.
Hey, welcome back to the show, everybody. One of the coolest parts of my job as a podcaster is getting to just talk to the coolest people and get to understand where they're coming from and their experiences and how they've really led them to have an interest or be passionate about the field of musician health and success and these kind of less talked about topics in music school and other areas that we dive into as musicians. And one of those people I came across on social media a couple of months ago. I can't remember how we got connected, but I think it was just through just something on social media.
Magic of social media. Yeah.
Magic of social media. And got to texting him a little bit and found out that we have some common interests in this field of musician health and creating successful opportunities for musicians. So I'm so excited to introduce Joshua Owen Mills to you guys today. He is a Welsh operatic tenor, and we've just had some great conversations going back and forth on social media, and I've been really, really looking forward to our conversation today. So without further ado, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to it too. We've had an exchange on Instagram, so I have an inkling of what this conversation is going to be about. But you never know with these situations where the conversation is going to go, and
right.
That's exciting for me. That's exciting for the audience, and I think I'm looking forward to it. Let's dive into it.
Yeah. So I guess the reason why we're talking today is because you and I have been talking about an ebook that you were writing specifically about illness for singers. And I had mentioned before we started recording, we've had some people that have been in that situation on the show before. But specifically how to prepare for times when when a musician as a freelancer has something happen health-wise that makes it so they can't do their job. And so, like I say, you have an ebook that you wrote, and I've got lots of questions that I want to ask you about that and encourage people to go get it on your website. We'll talk about that later. But what is your experience? Like, how did that come about? What is your experience with illness and or injury been as a freelancing operatic singer?
Yeah, well, the first thing to say is that and we hinted at this just before starting recording this, that there's a bit of the divide between, let's say, instrumentalists and singers, because on a low level, there is somewhat of a comfortable nature of singers saying, oh, there's something scratching my throat today. And you often hear that in the rehearsal period. Someone's sung a bit too much, or they've got a really demanding schedule, and people are open that it's affecting my voice. But that only goes so far, I would say, in the conversation. And if illness actually starts to interfere with the rehearsal process or with the performances, there definitely is a taboo about that, and people don't like to speak about that so much. So, as with any musician or performer, my belief is we're all at some point going to struggle with some type of illness, because it's just a profession, isn't it? And as I mentioned in the book, if we compare it with sports people have injuries. It adjusts and affects their track time. It doesn't mean that everything has gone wrong, but it means that you have to cater for that. And I've had a number of illnesses throughout my career, some minor. It might have been COVID or a cold or a sore throat or laryngitis or something like that that's just stopped me or kicked me out of being able to perform for a month or so. But you're right that those have consequences, particularly as a freelancer. It's different for someone that's in an ensemble or someone that's in an orchestral position, but as a freelancer, often people are reliant on turning up, doing the job, and everything going as planned. And you're right, in a way, that the title of the book hints that it's a book about illness for musicians, which it is, but it's more about actually what to do to make sure that when illness happens, that you're as prepared as possible. And there are a number of things that I mentioned, which is financial preparedness, also like the mental resilience, the accepting or expecting that you're going to be ill. I think is the right mentality, and often we're actually shocked when something happens, whereas we should be saying that we're specialists in our fields. You think about a pianist and the fingers, and when you actually think about it in depth, it's remarkable what happens for you to be able to do that job consistently. So we should expect and allow for little hiccups every now and again. So I'm sure that'll resonate with the people that are listening to this, whether they've been ill before. They're certainly going to get ill in the future, and it's about having all of your ducks in a row, so to say.
Yeah, and that was the thing I think that struck me about the book the most. And before I go further, I think I forgot to mention the title, but it's called "I'm Not Sick, the Show Must Go On." Everything a musician doesn't know about sickness. And I think that's just such a funny title and appropriate title for this industry, because that is the catchphrase of performing arts industry, right? Is the show must go on. And I think you said it so beautifully of like, we're human. We're going to have hiccups. We're doing something that's physically demanding. The thought of us not having something, a catch or some sort of adverse event that affects that, it's not very sound thinking to think that that's not going to happen.
No, but it's quite it seems quite boring in a way, doesn't it? And quite unartistic, I would say. There's something heroic about getting ill and pushing through and being the person that saves the show. And I'm not sure about you. It's something I see all the time. That it happened to me last week, actually. Someone was sick for the performance. They pulled out, which was the right thing to do because they wouldn't be able to do the performance. But someone came in their place, and they were the hero because they saved the show, and the show could go on.
Sure.
But there are some unhelpful examples. I cite one example in the book where there was one person in a production that broke their leg, and or I don't know whether they actually broke their leg or it was as close to getting as you can to breaking your leg. It was a pretty serious injury. But I just get the impression that in any other profession, you go, right, you've broken your leg. Now it's time to rest. But no, this person didn't rest. They did the rest of the show in a wheelchair, which the press hailed as something that's really heroic, and they pushed through and great. But I think when you actually unpick that, it's quite an unhealthy mindset. Surely it's better to recognize, okay, I've broken my leg. Things haven't gone well. I need to focus on recovery. Once recovery's gone well, then I can come back to the profession, bring my A game. But that drive to want to please the audience, and I'm sure there's a bit of pride in it as well, which
Oh,
I can
absolutely.
definitely say from my perspective that you don't want to give it up. But you look at the bigger picture, and sometimes there are some other things influencing that decision as well. It could be a financial part. It could be the pride. There's something that's within us that we don't want to give up that opportunity, but think long term, and you'd be better served.
Absolutely.
Would be my comment.
Absolutely. And it's just, yeah, we talk, I mean, this is a show about injury recovery and injury prevention for performing artists. And so that's why I think that this resource and this conversation is just going to be so helpful to people. I'm curious, was there an experience, because you mentioned that, that you've learned this, I assume through many experiences. Is there one experience where you kind of felt like in your personal performing career that you felt like was a turning point for you in like, hey, this thing happened and I realized that my ducks weren't in a row, or that, and we're talking maybe either from a financial standpoint or from a health standpoint, and it affected you in the same way that that like a violinist may need to take time off for tendonitis for an extended period of time, and all these different, like it's like a, what am I trying to say, like a cascading effect. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And there is one particular point that stands out, and it wasn't all that long ago actually, and it's a great example of how illness can throw you off your A game. So as we've used the sports analogy, that you have track time, but for us as musicians, it's not about achieving a track time. It's about a baseline of hitting a level that's acceptable, even if you're feeling a little bit unwell with your technique, with your career. You can't hit a certain baseline. But there was one performance in particular where there was some stuff going on in my life, whether it was stress or different medication I was taking. It was something that affected my voice, and I didn't want to accept that. And one particular memory of standing up in front of this audience, doing what I would consider, an aria that I can do standing on my head. I've done it countless times reliably, and suddenly there was just this realization that my body wasn't working for me. It was like my body was over there, I was over here, and there was just no connectivity. And that was a really bitter pill to swallow, because the pride was really at the heart of that. And yes, like as you mentioned, with a violinist, you could take some time out, but it's not always as clear cut as that, is it? Because the recoveries can be difficult. There can be an element where you might make a couple of sets ahead, but then it's 3 steps back, and you go, okay, so you're piecing things together. It took me a while to figure out how actually to overcome this, but there was definitely that just was a very unpleasant feeling. And out of everything in my whole career, I would say it's that feeling that if there was one thing that made me want to give up performing altogether, it was that sense of, oh, that really, it was not a night. You felt like you were a fraud in front of the audience, and that was not a feeling that I would wish upon anyone. And actually, that sense that I had on the stage is something that propels me to really have a great plan in place now to make sure that if I am ill, that recovery, having a good team around you as well, is super critical. Because if you've got that team around you that knows you in your high points and your low points, you've got someone that you can go to and say, look, this is what's going on, can you help me? If you're only going to people at your low points, they've got no points of reference. And we're used to that in school, right? Because we've got our teachers and we have that environment. But when you leave school, you're out on your own, and it's easy to lose those contacts and to prioritize them when you're a gigging musician. You've got a gazillion other things to think about. So what was telling for me, because I'm slightly further on in my career now, I haven't just left college. I left college over a decade ago now, so I've built my financial part. I have some financial resilience. However, it didn't take the sting out of that situation. It was
Oh,
still
absolutely not. Yeah.
that sucks, man. Like I still think about that performance, and one of my colleagues was saying, everything okay? So I knew that it wasn't just in my head as well, that other people had recognized something was going wrong, that things weren't quite right, and that was a low point. But it's good to have these low points, because that's where you can pivot and go, right, let's sort this out. And I had
Make a
to
change.
make some changes and speak to some people and find out, okay, this is something that's not going to change on its own accord. I had to think about things, change diet and exercise and sleep routines, and bounce back now, and everything's going well. So, but it's fickle, this profession is fickle because it relies on our bodies, and that has its strengths and its weaknesses. But I'd say that was definitely the low point.
Hey, real quick, sorry to interrupt the episode, but if you are a musician who's going through an injury right now and you feel like you could use some extra help or some extra coping strategies to help you get through this really sucky, difficult experience, head to musicianunchained.com/let's hang to see if a coaching relationship would be right for you at this time in your recovery. Okay, enjoy the rest of the episode. Thank you for sharing that. I think that that feeling you described is something that I think most, if not every musician who's had to come to like face to face with something that has inhibited their ability to perform has dealt with. That kind of sense of, I mean, it's a sense. I mean, you call it what you want, but it could be like your wounded pride. It's your sense of identity, your sense of self. Some people might call it like imposter syndrome if they've been able to do something before but they can't now. And so, and I want to kind of use this as a propeller to like some of the other things that you talk about in your book. But the like, how did that experience affect your sense of, okay, what is the role of this craft in who I am, and like, how did that experience teach you more about that?
Yeah, it's definitely a confronting feeling, because you're in that low point. You ask yourself, well, is this something that's really important to me? Is this the time to walk away? You ask yourself lots of different questions, some of which are completely irrational. It might have just been a one-off, and it could have been a blip in the road, which happens. We all have high and low points, but this was more of a systemic problem, something that was reoccurring, and I really that was the point where I'm going, I have to admit to myself that this is actually not going well for a reason that's out of my control, and I don't know what that particularly is yet. That was the most frustrating thing, the not knowing. If it was something that I knew that I could fix, then I would do it. I would follow through on what was required. I found that very frustrating. And you mentioned something very important then. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts actually as an instrumentalist as well, because as singers, there's definitely changes that come about with your voice throughout your career, and you don't know what those are. So when you're in school, you're training your voice, and my impression was I was training my voice for the rest of my career. The knowledge that I would have would serve me. Sure. But the reality is it's constantly changing. Even your physiology can change, which means that if you have your approach as a singer in your 30s as you did as your 20s, it's not going to work well. That you have to make changes because your voice is changing over time.
Absolutely.
I find that very annoying, actually. I'm like, I've done my training. I've put in my hours. But I've now, it's funny, coming out of this period, I've made my peace with that. And I see it as a positive now, that this allows me to get in touch with my team, to really find, right, well, I'm in my 30s now. How do I bring my A game in my 30s? And that's going to be different to how my voice is in my 40s. So constantly reinventing, and that's what makes the art form interesting. Maybe I was coming about this as a bit too much of a pragmatist, because I'm interested in all of these self-development podcasts, business podcasts. They're cool, they're very regimented, but they're very different to the artistic world, and sometimes I copy and paste, and it doesn't quite work. I have to reevaluate, and that's an example of that.
Yeah, no, well, you're so right, and I'm in that same camp of listening to that kind of stuff. That's actually kind of one of the reasons why I started this, because I feel like there are a lot of things that musicians and performing artists can gain from those types of materials. But to kind of answer or kind of give my thoughts on what you were just saying, I think that I've heard, I'm in my 20s, right? And so I'm still at the beginning of my career, but from what I've heard of other instrumentalists is like your body, like you said, your body's always changing. If you're using your body as part of your career, then it's going to go through change. It's going to need some updates. And I think that we can sometimes get in trouble. And when I say trouble, some of these types of adverse situations can happen if we try to be that old dog that can't be taught new tricks. And I think that being that constant student and being curious and being a learner, I think honestly can help not only people who are going through this physiological changes, but also it can help us as artists to kind of broaden our horizon a little bit in the sense of different interests or different exploring different parts of what makes us who we are. Because I think that's where, like, for me personally, I'm speaking from my personal experience, that was where I feel like with my injury and other people I've talked to with theirs, that I got into the most trouble from a psychological standpoint, is realizing that this skill set that I had been working on exclusively for the last 13, 14 years was basically all I had that made up who I was, that, like, at least in my self-perception of it, right? And so
Sure.
Having those points where you have to reevaluate things, I think can be really healthy for musicians, because it can help them to, or help us to realize that it's a part of us, but it's not all of us, and that can help, those other parts of us can help inform our artistry. That's at least been my experience.
You've summed it up so beautifully there, and the way in which I can reflect this from my personal experience is the pre-COVID Joshua and the post-COVID Joshua, two very different people.
I feel like everybody's got two versions of themselves.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and it's really remarkable, because pre-COVID, no interest in self-development. I was purely, I was a studied opera singer. I would go do concerts, and all of my eggs were firmly in one basket.
Right.
And my life now is so different, and I love that. My list of podcast subscriptions is so varied, and I listen to lots of different types of things, and it's great. I love it. The caution for myself is I have to rein myself in sometimes.
Sure.
And I'm in a process of doing that, actually. So it was quite revealing to me. I loved writing that book. Honestly, it was so much fun. I wrote it in so many different places, and very cathartic experience of looking at your life and putting these thoughts down onto the page. But I'm in that process and now of thinking, how do I sieve this down into what I do? So COVID has helped me broaden out, and now I'm narrowing down what my focuses are, because I get distracted very easily.
So, and myself as well. And that's where I feel like, especially for student musicians, and I'm 2 years out of my undergrad in music, and I'm currently in a master's program for something else right now. But I feel like, in general, and this is what kind of catapult us into the financial thing, is we tend to have a scarcity mindset as musicians. The industry has taught us to have that, unfortunately, because I'm not sure what the situation is in the UK, but in the United States, freelancing jobs are becoming more. Every year it's just like so much harder to make a living doing that. And the, there's only so many orchestra jobs if that's your thing, or there's only so many out here. There's military positions that you can perform in. And it's always like, there's always that one kid on the other side of the world who's practicing right now when you should be. Therefore, every minute of every day, you should be this should be all consuming, I guess, because you only have so much time, I guess. And so what is, your experience with illness, with writing this book, taught you about opening up that way of viewing the your career as a freelancer, especially?
Well, just on one thing that's popped into my head, because as interested as I am in self-development, constantly listening to these podcasts, and I'm one of these people that often tries to take the principles of what these people say and to apply it to being a musician. And
absolutely,
some things work, some things don't. But there was one TikTok, I think, in particular, that I was watching, where he specifically mentioned creatives and then musicians, saying, if you want to be a musician, you've got to be in not even the top 1%. You've got to be so good at what you do to get it out in this profession. And do you know what? If someone had said that to me all those years ago, you've got to be not even in the top 1%,
sure.
Really the best of the best of the best of the best, I would have probably gone, it's not for me, because I don't think I can hit it. And that's it. That is actually a really remarkable reminder that it is a vocation as much as it is it's a calling of vocation as well as a career. And you do have to love it to stay in it. And you're absolutely right. Here in the UK, there's a lot of problems as well with arts cuts and things like that. And I often log on and see a lot of negativity. Sometimes I'm negative myself because it feels like there's not much to be positive about.
Right.
However, I'm of the belief that, at least in my case, I know you're 2 years out of college and you're doing your master's program now, but my motto is, it's difficult to look forward into the uncertainty and to view all of those problems. It's easy to look back. And when I look back, I go, actually, you know what? I've had a really interesting career. I've sung at great opera houses and wonderful conductors, and what an interesting season last year was. And I go, yeah, but what about this season? And what's coming up next year? And I've got this gap here, or I'm worried about this, or what if this conductor says that? And I always preface that with, yeah, but it's gone okay up until now.
Yeah,
and that's it.
I'm still here.
It's a great, it's a great antidote. And even if you're even if you're entering the profession, doesn't matter. You could say, well, I was in college. That went well. I got my grades. I had a good mark in my exam, or whatever. Find the positives. Find the reasons that you're in this profession. And a wise professor said to me in my studies, he said, well, if you ever find yourself falling out of love with music, that's the time to leave. And I quite agree with that. That it's maybe the line is difficult to interpret.
Sure.
But I'm in a process now of rediscovering the joy of music, which sounds like a stupid thing to say as a musician, but COVID changed my habits so much, even to listening to music every day. I was listening to much less music, more podcasts, less music.
Yeah.
And I bought this LP vinyl player now. And I'm just playing all of these different tracks and got this big collection of music just to listen to, and just enjoying the experience of listening to music again has become a bigger priority. Not sure about you.
Beautiful. Yeah, I'm with you. I will confess, as a podcast creator, that I have definitely fallen into the trap of listening to more podcasts and music recently, and that's something I'm trying to change. The reason why I asked that question is because I feel like that scarcity mindset can really lead to some unhealthy decisions on the part of musicians. I've had other freelancers on the show that say they don't want to be perceived as damaged goods if they were to take time off for an injury or an illness, or they have bills to pay, right? And so they can't afford to take time off. that scarcity of like, this is all I've got, and I need to figure it out, even if I'm, crippling myself to do it.
Yeah. That's definitely is not a longevity mindset.
Right.
And
right.
It in my college days, there was a lot of talk about the equality of the profession. What some people had to work part-time jobs during college, other people didn't.
Sure.
They have money from mum and dad. And the more that I think about it, there are those inequalities, but that's something that you as an individual certainly are not going to be able to control. And you need to look at your individual circumstance. So if you are someone that's really been put under pressure to thrive as a musician, and that's stressing you out, might be looking at diversifying your income streams and finding some other things that are equally as interesting and enjoyable to you, that maybe take that pressure off. And a big part of my belief as well is that if you can start getting your financial knowledge, your financial literacy, or if you have financial literacy from an early age, for someone like yourself coming out of college, that's going to be a wonderful thing that's going to serve you in your career and gives you flexibility later on. So if you do have an injury, you can say, well, do I want to take time off? You have that option. And do you know what's interesting? After I run another podcast myself, and I've spoken to a lot of people that have gone through the corporate rat race, and they have burnt themselves out so much working these very, very intensive jobs, only to get to the other side to do something that they're interested in, they love. Often it's can be centered around music or creating an album or something like that. So let's find a way of doing this career that is balanced. We're not in that rat race. We get to enjoy what we do, but maybe we need to create some additional streams of income so we take that pressure off ourselves and find that balance. So that's what COVID has helped me find, is more of a balance. I'm still figuring it out, but I would always press musicians on that to look at their life as a whole, and to find additional streams of income is a big one, because it takes the pressure off so much. If you're going into an audition, can you imagine the difference between saying, well, it doesn't matter if I don't get this job, versus I need this job? That's gonna make you sing and move differently, right?
Well, and it's, so my master's degree that I'm doing right now is in actually sport and performance psychology. And we're studying a lot of things about, like the motivators that we have. And there's certain theories that talk about how, we can be motivated by needing to, avoid failure, or needing to, achieve success, right? So avoiding failure, you're like, to use a musician's example, you're practicing so you don't suck. You're practicing so that you don't look bad in front of your colleagues, versus you're practicing to move towards a goal, or you're practicing to work towards a job, or even like those are more external motivators. The more intrinsic ones being, I'm practicing because I freaking love to sing, or I love to play the trumpet, or whatever. And I think that what you were talking about diversifying and not needing necessarily, not like anxiously needing this to work out, can, like you said, take that pressure off and really create a foundation where, and I think you talk about this in the book as well, as like, when you have an experience where you need to take time off, you're like, okay, like this. I mean, obviously, no one necessarily
you don't
wants
go,
that to happen.
Yeah. You don't want to go, oh, great, I got to take time off, but not having to worry that what the next bill is to pay. That's a massive thing that you can put to one side. Say, well, that bit's done. Let me focus on getting better. And I sometimes take that for granted. I really, and I shouldn't, because I made that when I was in your position in my early 20s, I was grafting to make sure that I put that money aside, so that now, some 16 years later, I can benefit from those decisions that I made back then. But it felt hard at the time, but I was quite disciplined with it. And to your point about going to the practice room and that right mindset, I listened to a fantastic podcast. It was only an excerpt, actually, about 15 minutes, but very profound, and it stayed with me. A guy called Ali Abdaal, who's a British YouTuber on productivity, and he talked about how sometimes we can have resentment towards certain tasks, which will certainly be the task in the case in the practice room, where you've got that phrase that you really don't want to do. And he talks about the importance of making stuff fun again, and he gives an example of a McDonald's worker. And the McDonald's worker was doing the same thing every single day. And to make his job more interesting and to pass the time quickly, he came up with some games for himself. So he was upselling different sauces. So today I'm going to upsell a barbecue sauce, and there was no goal. He wasn't getting paid any extra to do this, but it made it fun. And every day he was trying to beat his next goal of how many can I get. And I think it's a good example of, if you're finding something in the practice room, getting a bit resentful, or if you're going to that audition with this negative mindset, then break that pattern, make it fun, remind yourself why you are a musician, and break the pattern a bit.
Hey, sorry to interrupt the episode yet again, but I wanted to tell you that if you are also a music educator of any kind and you feel like this is a conversation that needs to be had for your program, please reach out to me at clark@musicianunchained.com, and we can talk about how we can collaborate together to bring these topics, to bring these strategies to your program to help your students stay as healthy and as happy as they can while pursuing their passion. Keep on keeping on, and continue watching the episode. Yeah, so good. So good. I mean, this is the stuff that I just could talk about for hours. And the thing that I think I want people to get from this conversation the most, especially the freelancers who listen to the show, is that creating a plan is going to, and sticking to it, is going to help you in the long run more than not doing it. Obviously, that's hopefully a given through this conversation, but more that broadening your perspective a little bit and not being so narrowly focused on your craft will actually help you in the long run to be more financially secure when things do happen, but then also just help you have peace of mind and be able to enjoy what you're doing. I'm not saying that people in the audience are like depressed musicians that are constantly suffering, but when they are faced with a decision where, like, hey, I need to take time off because of this going on, or I don't want, it's just creating, or I guess eliminating that uncertainty, like you were talking about, as a freelance musician. That's something that I'm hoping that people get from our conversation today.
100%. And I've seen that in my career, and it's a principle that I try to stand by, is that having other interests, hobbies, things outside of the profession is something very important. And there are people that I've seen, or I've worked with at the very highest level, that you can tell that 95% of their life is what's going on in that rehearsal room, that they're so committed to it, which the perfectionist in me totally admires that. I'm like, that is awesome. Like, I wish I could be that committed. But when I see them on stage, and certainly when I see them in their personal life, I'm like, there's something lacking. And there are other people that have that balance. You can see that they have interests outside of music. And I always like having those conversations because that's my nature. Sure. But then when they go on stage, I see a more well-rounded person. And so there is that balance. If you tip too much the other way, of course, then maybe you're not in the practice room and you're not bringing your A game. But I do think that that's the challenge, to find that balance for yourself as an individual, for certain.
Yeah, and how do you feel like that's, like, that well-roundedness has helped you as a musician? Because I'll tell you from perspective of a recent graduate, and just at least out here in the States, of the I guess the culture, the unspoken culture that's surrounding music education, collegiate music education, is that if I take time off, like I said, then I'm behind, and yet not like these other things outside of the practice room, they aren't helping me become a better musician. And that's like my number one goal.
Do you know what? I think that's a really unhelpful way to think and a very dangerous way to think. That on one hand, again, the perfectionist within me wants to go, yes, actually, right, that there's someone else in the practice room that's putting in hours that you're not. But
Sure.
I think that's just the wrong way to think, that you've got to see the other parts of your life as a musician, whether it's sports, getting outside, whether it's
Sure.
reading, all of those other things that actually make your practice or your dedication to your craft much more high quality. There will be people that will be doing more hours in the practice room. Whether or not they're productive hours is a completely different question. And I think that it's not a like for like comparison. So I would always say caution people comparing themselves to others in that way.
Absolutely.
To see yourself as an individual, and also ask yourself, what is your end result? What is the dream? Reverse engineer from that point, and maybe there are a couple of different dreams, so that if one doesn't go completely in that direction, maybe there's another dream that is close by, and you can make that work as well. So
sure.
I would say so.
Yeah, and one of the things you touched on, I want to pick your brain a little bit, just out of curiosity, because we've both gotten into the content creation side of being an artist, which is a whole can of worms in and of itself. But I'm just curious, as you were writing this book and as you've been doing these other things of putting stuff out there that may not be on stage, did you ever feel any, like, I don't know if guilt is the right word, but like kind of that perfectionistic, like, oh, I'm not doing something, not doing something that's actively, quote unquote, helping me in my craft. Like, did you ever feel like when you're writing this book, you're like, oh, like that perfection? I love how you say that perfectionistic side, because I totally relate to that.
That's very.
Did you ever feel that guilt?
Yes, I did. In some ways, I guess if we're looking things as through a sanitized lens of
sure.
what a musician does and what a musician doesn't,
right.
then I could say, well, I'm wasting time writing a book. But the benefits that came from writing a book it's something I'd never done before, and the creative process, it was just so interesting to try something. I never thought I'd be able to write a book, and it was just so cool to have like this collection of thoughts over a 6-month period, because I didn't write it all in one go.
Sure.
And just a chapter at a time, idea. I got ill whilst writing a part of the book, and I was like, well, that makes this easier.
Makes it more authentic, I guess.
yeah, it certainly does. And yeah, there is that part of the question of, is this part of a musician's life? What I'm subsequently learning is that you could have different ideas, different umbrellas, but it doesn't mean you need to share all of those ideas with your musician's audience. That's something that's actually helping me at the moment. I might have an impulse or an idea to share, a financial thought, for example, but what I'm realizing from creating content is that you learn very quickly what your audience likes and what they don't like. And my desire to share some of this information sometimes with other musicians is my desire, because I think it's what would help people, but it's not always what they want. And a recent example of that is just doing some more music-based videos where I'm simply singing, because that's what I do as a musician.
Yeah, the beautiful voice, by the way. I love those videos.
Thank you. And the engagement's much higher. So that's an example of my audience saying, well, we'd like to see a little bit more of that. And when I talk about investing for your future, people go, not really interested in that. So that's a frustration from my part, because I feel that people, musicians in particular, really need to hear this information. But
Absolutely.
what's the phrase? You can't take a horse to water and force it to drink. You've
right.
That's a reality. So I'm always trying to find that balance for myself as a musician as well. How much do I sing? How much do I do of the other stuff? But I think at my heart of hearts, I know what I am and what I'm doing, and I feel that within my body, if that makes sense. If I have a day and I sit back and I go, what a great day, I got an inkling that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And there are some other times where I'm struggling at that. I go, maybe I'm not doing as much singing, and I can feel that internal pull. And I think that's what keeps me on the straight and narrow.
That self-awareness is so important. I feel like we as artists are, the nature of our craft is that it forces us to be a little more self-aware than if I was like an accountant or something like that. Because there's so much introspection involved of being an artist. And I think that's led some people to think that all that introspection means that they need to dig up all their dirt and just kind of be in a sour or like kind of that perpetuating that suffering artist vibe, and then if something else that comes along like these other interests or these other things, they feel like it's not going to inform their art, their music, their performing. Does that make sense? What I'm trying to get at is like,
yeah, it certainly does. And one thing that I'm having to be very cautious of as a person that's very interested in creating content and musician content is being on the other end of what other people are creating. And it can happen once a day, twice a day, where I'll see someone else doing something, and it's just a little judder, and I go, ooh, and you can feel that hit of jealousy. And I'm ever so cautious. I'm training myself. Go, no, actually, and I verbalize it, and I go, I'll try my best to write someone a comment, and I go, that's fantastic, good for you. And that, it's so important to have to see other musicians doing well and to wish them well. And this comes back to the 1% thing. We can pay the like for like thing. He's doing and it's a competition, probably not going to serve you well for a career of longevity. Wish your colleagues well, and support them when you can, and often when you do, not only is that well received from them, but it helps you in the profession as well, that people are more likely to remember you, to reach out to you, or to throw a gig your way.
Sure.
If you support them.
Sure. So that kind of leads me to the next thing I wanted to talk about, because you talk about in the book, and this was something that like I've heard about in other circles that I'm in. It's not something I've necessarily had to use myself, because I'm not a freelancing musician at this point. But it was just something that I felt like was so blatantly obvious. But there's obviously some pushback, as you talk about in your content, from musicians, because they say, oh, I'll worry about that later, or, oh, that's a waste of money. But I think you know where I'm going with this, but it's the topic of insurance of your craft. And in the United States, I believe it's called disability insurance, or in the UK, is it called income protection?
That's absolutely right, yes.
So my question to you is, and we probably just opened a whole can of worms for any freelancing musician listening to the podcast right now. But why is that so important as a musician? And what, like, if we were to address like that one, that main, I guess, argument against it of, oh, I'll do that later, or it's not a huge benefit, how would you talk to that?
Got it. So I don't know the system in the US, although I listen to a lot of US financial podcasts. This topic of disability insurance doesn't come up all that much, but I'm sure there are some parallels. So I'll speak about it from a UK perspective, and then hopefully there's some parallels.
Sure.
Totally underused, unknown in the UK. I don't know one other singer that has an income protection policy, not even one other musician, which is a strange thing for me, because if we go back to what we said earlier on, you're gonna get sick. Well, the question is, if you're going to get sick, then why not protect yourself against something that's going to happen? And it's the same with any insurance. There's a couple of problems that people don't think that it's going to pay out if you get sick. People think that they'll wing it and save on the premiums, the amount that you pay each month.
Sure.
But when you look at it factually, first of all, the younger that you get this type of insurance, because it's often can be a multi-decade insurance policy that will cover you up until. So my policy covers me until I'm 55 or 57, I think. So I've got a couple more years to go. I took it out years ago, and since taking out that policy, I've got some other pre-existing conditions now. So meaning that if I did it in my mid-30s, I'd be listing that I had this and this and this.
Oh yeah.
So you're more of a risk for the insurer. So it's going to become more costly. And the biggest pushback, I think, is that I can't afford it, I would say. Or another thing that cropped up that I saw, people said, well, I can self-insure. And I mean, self-insuring is a good idea. So having a pot of money so that you can ride out any storms. But if it's a serious illness that's going to knock you out for a couple of years, or in some cases, there are, of course, people that have to take a step back from the entire profession. There's a famous story in the UK of a singer that a piece of machinery from a stage, piece of set, crushed his leg, and he never sang again for decades and decades for the rest of his career. So in that case, a product like this would say, well, are you able to sing anymore? No. And it would then pay out a proportion of your salary, typically 50 to 60%.
Sure.
Within a defined period. So mine is set at a week, which maybe is a bit extreme, but if I get sick within a week, I can ring up my insurer and say, I'm sick. I have to provide some medical evidence for that illness from a doctor, and then they'll look at my previous income, and they'll then calculate how much 60% is of that particular tax year. So it's difficult as a freelancer, because if you're in a fixed position, you go, right, it's 60% of my income, which is $80,000 or whatever. Okay, you know where you stand. But as a freelancer, you're like, some years it'll be $80,000, then 60, and then 20, and then 100. So you're playing with averages there. But it's something that I understand what people say when they go, oh, is it really necessary? I pay it every month, and I go, oh man. It's going to pay it in a few days' time, and I'm going to think the same thing as I always do. Oh man, it's that time of month again. But I know that it's there if I need it, and if I have to take some time out of work due to illness, that salary is going to come in. It's going to help pay the rent, pay the mortgage, pay the bills, etc. And I think it's a under-discussed and underutilized feature for any musician. I should caveat that by saying that I'm not an insurance expert, and I just speak from personal experience.
Right, and I have no personal experience, so I'm not going to tell you in podcast land what to do either way. But I wanted to bring that up because it's a big part of the book as well, and I hope that that people will go out to your website and get this, because it's just, I mean, it's a quick read, but I feel like especially for freelance musicians, it's a really helpful resource. And for me, it's just as a kind of a musician injury obsessed guy, me. This just seems like it would be part of the toolbox of any freelancing or professional musician, because you're like we've been talking all day, your instrument is your body is part of your working instrument. The thing that helps you pay your bills, and if that breaks down, you need to still pay your bills, and you want to have some help, still have some help in that department.
And it's so easy just to say, oh, it's not necessary. I had a friend last week go on vacation to Turkey and had food poisoning or some kind of virus.
Wonderful.
Straight into the hospital. Thank God I got my travel insurance. And it's only until we're in that position when we go, you're in that crisis mode, that you're so thankful that you've got those protections. But it's so easy to put it off. And
Right.
thank you so much for those positive comments. And I really appreciate you writing the book. And I hope it's helpful. The amount of hours that I spent writing it have definitely not been offset by the people reading it. But, if one person takes the action
Yeah.
or enjoys reading it, because I try to make it fun and
Yeah,
and
it's a very
throw
easy
in
read.
some,
Yeah.
yeah. So, yeah, I'm proud of what I did. I haven't
Yeah.
sold 10,000 copies or anything, but that doesn't
Sure.
matter. It was a
Sure.
part of the process and a nice creative thing to do, and the aim was to help
Absolutely.
people as well.
Absolutely. And I think just to kind of wrap that part of the this part of the conversation up, I've talked about it on the show before. There's a quote by Benjamin Franklin where he says, "An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure," and it's just so true when it comes to this subject, because it's an investment. Like we've been talking, like I've talked on the show about just investing in yourself, and this is literally more or less an investment. Maybe not by the book a financial investment, but you are investing in a future occurrence that could possibly happen, and that peace of
100%.
mind is, for me, well worth the grind in that
Yeah.
sense. So,
And a great way to sum it up in a sentence is that if there was a cash machine paying the equivalent of your income every single month, and you go out and it dispenses, you go, oh, I get used to this, great. Would you think of insuring that cash machine just in case it goes wrong? Well, you go, heck yeah. If it's just like 5% of the overall, I'll insure it, make sure it works until I die. Well,
sure.
You are that cash machine. You
Sure.
work every month to make sure that you pay your bills and you have some money left over for nice things. Why not insure your income?
Okay, last interruption, I promise you. Before we get to the rest of the episode, I just wanted to let you know that if you're a musician going through an injury and you need a community to help you get through it, if you need a sense of support, some people you can ask questions to, just gain pick me up whenever you need it. The Musician Unchained support group, formerly known as the Trust the Process Podcast Injured Musician Support Group on Facebook. The link is in the description below for you to join. You don't have to go through this alone. Keep on keeping on and enjoy the rest of the episode. Yeah. Well, anyway, I don't want to talk about every part of the book, because then this will become a replacement for it, and that's not what I'm trying to do. But Joshua, thank you so much for being willing to come on the show today and talk about it and your experiences. This has honestly been one of my favorite conversations I've had. I'm trying to get more and more singers on the show because, it's funny for me because I'm in the sports psychology world now. To talk to and bring my perspective as a musician and talk about this platform that I have with them, because they're like, oh, I never thought, musicians it's just like never would have occurred to them, and not disparaging anybody, but it's just like, well, you're using something over and over again. That's part of your body. It's going to break down from time to time. And I think for me, even as a trumpet player, it didn't occur to me until I started doing this show that, like, oh shoot, vocalists are in the same position that, or in a similar position that instrumentalists are in that regard, of that they're, the whole injury or illness is a possibility and needs to be addressed. So I'm so grateful for you coming on and sharing your own experiences.
You're very welcome. And I think what you're doing is awesome. And I loving the trust the process and that you're making it look all very professional. And
thank you.
It's great to connect with you. And we'll keep in touch on Instagram. If anyone has any questions for me, then they can feel free to reach out on Instagram. My handle is at Joshua Owen Mills.
Oh, yeah.
You'll find me there. Yeah.
We'll put all that in the show notes. I actually have two last questions I ask all my guests.
Great.
That I want to run by you. So you're on the street and you get approached by somebody who listened to our conversation today on the show. And they say, hey, I'm a musician. I'm going through something. I'm going through an illness or an injury. What's one piece of advice that you would give that person?
So
doesn't matter what instrument.
It doesn't matter what instrument. They're currently going through an illness. My one piece of advice would be, don't rush back to work. When you think about your career, and it's easy to think about your career when you're in your early 20s as things in the short term, but
Sure.
if you're in this career for the long term, you don't want to rush putting that time and attention into a really good recovery. And it's so tempting. The allure of the profession is to get straight back into it, to meet those commitments, but spend the time getting better and doing what you have to do, and then bring your A game after that, and devote everything that you need to when you're back. But don't half-ass a recovery, quite frankly, because you got to dedicate yourself to it to bring your A game later on.
Well, that's part of your A game is putting your A game into a recovery. So that's great.
Exactly,
That's great.
exactly.
The last question I ask my guest Joshua is what I call a time travel question, because if you were able to go back to that experience you had where you had that aria that you were singing that you had done so many times before, but then you had that experience which kind of propelled you into this whole I guess field of exploration of financial preparation and all the experience that you had that were subsequent of that, but you were able to either take it away or leave it there. And what would you choose?
Oh, I don't
And
know
I've had
whether I
people,
can answer that.
no, it's okay. I've had people answer on both sides of that aisle, and I'm just fascinated by it.
I don't know whether I could answer that, actually. Can I say both?
Yeah, of course. No, and I legitimately, I just love hearing people's responses to that because I think it's the most human thing we talk about on the show. Of there's this adverse experience that we've had, and things have come of it. And it really just helps me and the audience to show like, I guess, the human side of not only the human side of the people we're talking to on the show, but also just the human experience of like there are tough things that we go through, but we can make the best of it. Doesn't mean that we necessarily were like overjoyed that it happened, right? But there were good things that happened from it, and some people they feel like, hey, I feel like I could have learned those lessons outside of that experience, so I would have wished that experience hadn't happened. And I'm just curious because everybody's experience is so unique.
Yeah.
So if the answer's both, then the answer's both.
Well, I think the answer is both in some respects. I remember entering my professional career, and I was very fortunate that I had this row of experiences that led me to some contracts that were coming up, and I had a good sense of momentum.
Sure.
And that was great, but it was quite blinding as a young adult as well, because I felt that almost that I was invincible. That I know exactly what's going on. I know this person, that it's all going to be fine. And there's a good element to that, 'cause the arrogance of youth, isn't it? You just wing it and you go, this is great, and I'll figure out what happens. But it's that adversity of things going wrong that then make you confront and
Sure.
see that behavior in a different light. And would I want that to disappear? No, I probably wouldn't, because I think that's what builds you. Going full circle to what we were saying earlier on, that builds that sense of credibility on stage. So when you stand on stage and you deliver a performance, you're not just delivering this basic level up. You've got no life experience. You bring those things with you, and I think that's a very important part of being a musician. And it's funny, isn't it, that I watched one of these videos, meme videos, of this little kid playing the blues. And it's amazing. Like, he's playing it with so much soul, and the comments are hilarious because this guy, he looks like he's in his 60s and lived all of these life experiences, but of course he hasn't, and that's a caricature of things that he's seeing from other people. And I think that's a good example of our lives as musicians. Is that there's stuff that happens on and off stage that are all character building, and it's best to try and make peace with that, and if productive, to bring it into the person you are on stage, because I think that makes you a more well-rounded musician.
Awesome. That's such a great way to tie this conversation off with a bow. So thank you for your time today, man. And I hope and I look forward to more conversations that you and I will have in the future. So anyway, for everybody out there in podcast land, thanks for joining us for another episode of the show. If you liked what you saw here and you want to see more of it, make sure you join our newsletter. You can find that at musicianunchained.com. And I'll put all of Joshua's information linked to his website, his book that we were talking about, all in the show notes below. So until next time, keep on keeping on. Hey, thanks for tuning into this episode of Trust the Process, the official podcast of Musician Unchained, the newest coaching program dedicated to helping musicians navigate and overcome injury. But before you go, I have a few quick ways you can stay connected and support our growing community. First of all, I'd love to hear from you. Shoot me a text with the link below and share your thoughts, questions, or just say hi. You can also check the show out on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. If you found value in today's episode, consider making a donation to support our mission of empowering musicians worldwide. Every contribution helps us create more content and resources for you, so visit link number 2 below to support the mission. If you decide to donate, I'll send you my newest resource, the Injured Musician Toolkit, which is an ebook designed to give you tools to help you get through your injury. Subscribe to our newsletter to get exclusive insights, tips, sneak previews of episodes, and announcements straight to your inbox. Act now and I will send you a free gift. So sign up at www.musicianunchained.com/newsletter. And if you or someone you know would like to go deeper with me in the topics of injury and mindset, head over back to musicianunchained.com and check out the Let's Hang tab. As always, I want to thank Daniel Baldwin, my audio engineer, and my sister Dana Lovell for her help with the promotional materials. There is no podcast without them. Before I go, I want to tell you how much I deeply appreciate your time and support. You are not alone on this journey. There are musicians and educators out there who need this resource, and we need to get it to them. Together, we are breaking the chain of old habits and thought patterns that don't serve us anymore, and unchaining the potential within ourselves to face each challenge with strength and resilience. So, as I always say, keep on keeping on, and keep trusting the process. Until next time.